Hello, hello. We are here live with our first official stream of the Forgotten Composers stream or podcast. We still don't know how to call it. Uh, if a stream or a podcast. Well, probably it will turn into a podcast, but right now it is a stream. So I'm here with Pang Shonting or Shonting Pang. I'm Juan Virgilio Colon, and we are gonna talk today about some composers, post-war composers, and contemporary composers. Well, yeah, post-war composers that have influenced our music. So we should start with one that we all love and that we think that will stay within the confines of we can consider canon in Western music, which will be Ligeti,
Yes,
György Ligeti.
yes. I think if you study music composition seriously, it is hard not to study Ligeti. It's just like in the past masters all study Bach and Mozart. You cannot
Mm-hmm.
skip those composers.
Yeah.
If you are serious about being a classically trained composer, you must study Bach, of course. But on top of it, please also study Ligeti.
Yes.
A lot of techniques I'm still using were from Ligeti. I I
Well. Yeah. Yeah.
I think um I was very shocked when I saw the full score for Atmosphere. I was shocked. I
Atmosphere, the full score. Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, it is huge. Only visually speaking, you see it and it's like wow. But then again, you get into it and see the textures and all of it, and then you know more about it. Yeah, I must mention that. Yeah, he's a required study. I was saying that last time that I didn't. My first written pieces were very influenced by impressionism and expressionism. I think that when I started composing by myself as my own with my own voice was when I started studying Ligeti. Actually,
I think a little confession or a little bit about history of myself. When I before I got admitted to the conservatory, in the entrance exam, the professors asked me, oh, who is your favorite composer? At that time, I didn't know much about so-called contemporary music composer or post-war composers. So I answered, "Oh, I like Mahler."
Mahler.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's an okay answer, but but maybe not so impressive. But anyway, I got admitted, and then I just want to say before I got to know some of the Ligeti music, I was in a romantic mindset, and I told my classmates, oh, I would like to compose symphonies because I
But
listen to Mahler's a lot. Of course, I
they
don't have a
will
chance to
be
compose symphonies.
huge symphonies then, like really huge symphonies of course 1,000 musicians.
And and then in the first composition lesson in the conservatory, I I wanted to write a string quartet, and then I bought a box set of Shostakovich string quartet, which is also good, but later on I understand
Yeah,
I
I
was ignorant.
yeah, and now that you mention uh, Shostakovich, they're gonna play here in Puerto Rico. The symphony orchestra is gonna play the 10th symphony, the one that he wrote after Stalin died. And I'm like, okay, it's all good and well, and I'm probably gonna go and listen to it live and stuff. But it's like, man, they put it up there and all that stuff. But just a few years earlier, uh, and this is a side note that we can discuss later. This composer, right? But a few years earlier, previous to the 10th symphony of Shostakovich, was composed to Rangalila Symphony by Messiaen, by Olivier Messiaen, and that's really a huge symphony. That's been described, and rightfully so, as the ninth of the 20th century. But yeah, we should continue with Ligeti. We were talking about
But
Ligeti.
yeah, but I would say it was a long way before I got to know Ligeti. But I so therefore in my previous sound world, or in my previous attempts to write bigger pieces, I thought of Mahlers, I've thought of like Shostakovich, and then the day when I saw Ligeti's Atmosphere, the full score, I was, what? Why? Why? Why do we need to divide the strings? Why do we need to write every individual part? Because when I listened to Mahler, I thought, oh, a lot of chamber music written in an orchestral setting, and then listen like chamber and orchestra being they interact with each other. That's my take about Mahler. And then I see, hey, Ligeti, that's crazy. The writing is so detailed, but in the
Yes,
sense that there are a lot of nuances between each individual voice, but in such a huge orchestral setting. And 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 if you are a little bit more advanced, and if you have some experience about orchestration, you always learn that, oh, uh, you need to double, you need to create some kind of, you need to give enough weight to a sound. You want to thicken the texture. But you see what Ligeti is doing, just a lot of textural writing, and then each voice is a little bit different. Remember, just a little bit.
and it's very interesting because his music was kind of a protest. He was rebelling against what was the established avant-garde of the time, which were Boulez and Stockhausen, pointillistic music, right? He actually began writing in response, in a way, to that. Yeah, well, and the first piece that we can say was in his own language was the second string quartet, right?
Yep. Second string quartet is definitely a masterpiece.
It
I
is,
think I think it is more easy. I think it would be easier even for lay people compared to Atmosphere, because for Atmosphere you can hear a very I would
uh,
say elastic.
I'm wrong. I'm wrong. He this quartet. I got confused. Yeah, this wasn't the first one in his language. Atmospheres was one of the first one in that Ligetian language. Let's call it that way.
And I would say when I listened to Atmosphere, of course I was in awe, and I think, wow, what? But and then later on I had a chance to listen to his string quartets, and at that time I don't remember whether I was about to compose my first string quartet, but anyway, I was I really like it, and I found that, oh, actually it can be so colorful. In my very first encounter with Ligeti's music, I find his music very elastic, like a very long, very,
Yeah, it's very about the process. It's not you go from section A to section B, and it's more about the process. How you see a lot of his pieces start in unison and with a certain rhythm, right? Like
yep.
the Chamber Concerto, or well, a lot of his pieces. But right now it comes to mind the third, that mechanical third movement of the chamber concerto. and it then expands into this whole array of different relationships. I think that his music is basically perfect for studying it with set theory, actually. But it also misses the point, because um, his structures, his pitch structures, yeah, they are magnanimous, they are very organized and stuff, but it's more about, well, as I told you, the process, but also about the textures. I learned a lot about the textures from him. I think that the first piece that he wrote in the Ligetian language that we are referring to would be the apparitions for full orchestra. Have you uh, studied that one?
No, I didn't. Yeah.
No, I've listened to it a couple of times, but the ones that I've studied the most are the chamber concerto and the pieces for wind quintet. Yeah, that one is really good, and it doesn't get mentioned that much though. But yeah,
But and one thing that we should add about Ligeti is um the very dense texture that he created in um usually involved the use of polyphony.
of
I mean,
course. Yeah, yeah,
not just polyphony, but also the polyrhythm.
yes,
Very dense polyrhythm, and
and
um and sometimes
that's what
sometimes
I was referring to with the textures. You're pretty much. um Describing it in a more detailed manner. Yeah, the polyrhythms, the pitches, the
and
polyphony. It's amazing. It's really amazing music.
and one thing that's one little tip, if I have a chance to share with younger students, I would say try to use some polyphony polyrhythm, because you can create a very dense texture, and somehow maybe the workload of a dense texture can be shared by several musicians. Maybe it is even easier for those individuals. And because if you want, for example, if you want a musicians to play, let's say, 5 notes in the tempo 88, it's okay if it only lasts for one beat, but if it lasts longer, it can be a problem. So you can use, but if you are having an ensemble, maybe one instrument can play triplet and the other instrument can play 16th notes, and it sounds very dense. It's more or less like very dense, and but actually it's easier than asking asking individual musicians to play 5 notes in a beat.
Definitely, and that takes me to the next point, that it is not about like traditional polyphony, that each melodic line must be clear. It is about the total texture, the texture as a whole, the integral texture, the the music, the overall music, the overall arc. It's like if you are watching it from afar, instead of like traditional back polyphony, let's say, that you are using a microscope, you are kind of like more using a telescope from afar, and it's like this whole universe, this whole galaxy that that you see the little fragments and the little parts interacting with each other, and sonically the effect is really beautiful, I think.
And and I think we should also talk about the section, the structure, because when we talk about like the atmosphere, and also how do we call it, that the poem symphonic, is it called the metronome thing, poem symphonic, or I don't know how to pronounce it's like 100 mechanical metronomes.
Let me look
Do
for it. I
do you
also
know this work?
yeah, yeah, I know the work.
Yes,
It,
I think and a lot of so earlier pieces, you can hear some kind of process, like what you said. But in for example, in his string quartet number 2 or chamber concerto or the
It's Poème symphonique
poem
in
symphonic. Sorry for
in
my
1962.
ignorance.
I didn't remember that it was called this. It's very interesting, and it's worth analyzing why it
It's
is
a,
called this way.
is I mean, it's like what you said. His earlier attempts in this kind of language was about a process,
Yes,
but later on,
the
it
form was
becomes a
the
little bit more.
content. In that sense, the form was the content itself. It doesn't get any more uh, relatable, any more symbiotic, any more interchangeable, any more interrelative.
But
Is that a word?
later on,
Than that.
I think he made his music even more engaging for even for people who don't listen to contemporary music by creating a lot of wild variety within a work. A very, some sometimes you can say it's pretty sessional. In his string quartet number 2, I like how many movements? 4 or 5 movements. All are contrasting, and
Yes.
all have the very different types of motion, and
But
and
what
it
I
is.
was always influenced by, the ones that shocked me the most were mechanical, or whatever you may describe them, movements, where he put play mechanical uh, as an adjective, or as the, you might say, the tempo, whatever. Um, yeah,
And
that
what do you
that
think
that
about?
really stayed with me, and it comes from his time in the 50s, learning about electronic music, I think, and that's the origin of it all. That's how he thought about music, like, he, well, at least for some time, right? Or what, how we think that he thought about music, we cannot be certain.
By the way, what do you think about his violin concerto?
um i'm I'm not that familiar with that one,
I
actually.
I I
I'm more familiar with the double concerto, which I really really like, and with his cello concerto. I think that those two are kind of like, he was already a master, especially in the double concerto. He was already a master of that uh, language. He started developing in 58, in 1958, you might say.
I I I would say one thing that is very special for the concerto is it somehow um return to the old tradition about cadenza.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
yeah.
very fun because you may compose your own cadenza for his violin concerto if you are very confident about your composing ability.
Well, the
Yeah,
soloists must know the Ligetian language. Like,
yeah,
I
and
think.
and and one thing before we talk about Lachman or Lutus or
Lachenmann
Lloyd
is
space
next.
composers. One thing that you should know, if and you will realize very quickly if you truly study Ligeti, or even if you don't study his music seriously enough, you will notice that a lot of pieces are very pitchy,
Well,
very
yeah,
pitchy, and
yeah,
but it still sounds very new. It is not necessary to bring in a lot of noise to be new.
yeah. We have focused more on form and on textures and all that stuff, but we must place him within the Hungarian composers tradition, and that's where the something like the first string quartet comes in. That is very Bartokian, like in the language of Bela Bartok, right?
Very
And
different from his later works.
yes, but still, there are some elements there that survive, don't you think? Wouldn't you say? Like the pitch. pitch
and
and some type of melodic aspect.
and I would say rhythmic vitality is is very visible in his earlier and later works. So, I myself I played the piano a little bit, and
Oh,
I
yeah,
tried his piano etudes, very rhythmic and very fluid.
yeah.
Um, so anyway, if you want to listen to new music, but you can only listen to one composer, please listen to Ligeti. You
That's why
don't need
we,
any other
yeah,
composer, to be honest. But in this episode, we are not talking about Ligeti only. We are
only.
going
Now
to
we're going to the
make
next
you
one.
make you overdose of contemporary music composer. At least all of the composers we are going to talk about today are big names that you must
Yes.
study if you are a serious composition student.
If you consider yourself a composer of new music, I think these are most, right?
Yeah,
Well, unless you wanna repeat styles pre, like post romantic styles or movie music, or wanna be a movie music composer. Well, even though Ligeti was used by Stanley Kubrick very effectively in his movies. So yeah, uh, if you wanna be a composer, if you're serious about composition, uh, we think that you should study these composers because in the 20th century they were the giants of the 20th century, and in some countries, in some traditions, in some conservatories, they get ignored for some reason. I'm in Puerto Rico, and people don't basically don't know these names. We are talking about trained musicians, and that's a shame. That's a pity. But well, those are our 2 cents. Let's go on to the next one, which is Helmut Lachenmann,
oh no.
the
it,
one that broke it all. Let's say, nah, not so
I
much, but it
I'm
was
going to
very.
embarrass myself again. When
Why?
when I okay when I was a music student at in Hong Kong, um, because composition majors had to find musicians to play our own music, and so I think at least most of us were scared to the point that we don't want musicians to reject our proposal, to reject our music. So first, Lachenmann's music was not well received, even as a composition major.
No, no.
Not really.
Well,
Be-
in
And
it was the Hong Kong Conservatory, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm talking about the Hong Kong Academy for Performing Arts. It was long time ago. I hope nowadays people think differently. But in the past, we were a little bit skeptical about writing this kind of challenging and noise-based music. I didn't study a lot of his music until I went to Buffalo. And
Yes,
why I said I embarrassed myself?
that's pretty
Because
interesting.
because
It was the same for me actually, but for
and
me it's another
and I
story.
have to embarrass myself because one day I listened to his music in my car. I
Yes.
I drove an old Camry. Perhaps you still
Yeah,
remember.
I remember we used
And
to go
and
and eat burgers. Do you
and then,
remember when we used to eat a lot of burgers
yeah,
at that place in Buffalo? Yeah, it was
and
awesome.
and we also went to Library Cafe a few times. I like that cafe. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Oh,
anyway, the main thing is how I embarrassed myself. I inserted the CD of Lachemann's music, and then I was driving, and then my car was old. It was 10 years old back then, at least 10 years old or 11 years old. I thought my car was broken.
I am sharing a picture of Lahenman just so people can see him on
when
screen.
because I was listening to Lachman, and then a lot of like so-called like hype high bowing pressure and scratchy sound, and I thought, shit.
No, it opened for me when I listened to him. It opened a sound world that I didn't know was possible with instruments. Yeah, and I guess this is the Lachenmannian experience for everyone that listens to him for the first time. Actually, it's kind of like once you listen to Lachenmann, it's like you cannot go back to listening to music in the same way, or to composing music actually in the same way, because you got all of it from even from one piece, like from Pression for cello, I think. um it's like so many techniques used well, organized in such a precise manner, in such a musical manner, and non-traditional way. Like it extends the language of the composer in such a way that you cannot ignore it. It simply no. It would be a fool's errand, or to dismiss it. Why? No. It extends your palette, your color palette. If you think of us as painters of times, like our teacher used to say to us, like we paint time, right? Well, that palette got extended by two at least, or by well, by two, let's say. It got extended by Laheman, in such ways that, well, eh, he cannot be ignored. He created sound worlds that, I how to describe it? Music concrete, instrumental music concrete doesn't does his music justice. I still can remember kind of like his orchestra piece. I forget right now. Can you speak more about him while I search for this one? Hello, Chonting. I
Do you
lost
hear
you.
me? Yeah, I
Yes.
just
Yeah. No.
maybe I just muted myself. Yeah, I would
Okay.
say for Nachman, his music of course has a lot of noise-based materials, just like what you mentioned. But another good thing of his music is he had a lot of instructions or
Yes.
in his music. Those
Very, very
instructions
specific.
uh, are usually about a practical advice about how to carry out those techniques, and he definitely has very clear ideas about how the sound should be. This
Yeah,
this
and he
this
described them very, very eloquently.
in
So he kind of like, some people say like music from other composers are not gonna be played the same when they die, but I think Lachenmann's music, besides being very much recorded, pretty much all of his work, like only by seeing the score, by reading what he wanted, he was very specific. He described the techniques with such a detail, like the bow pressuring, or let's say, um different ways to play the strings, or different ways in which he used the wind instruments, like, or whether it be, um like the tongue noises and tongue based noises and stuff like that. Yeah, he was very, very specific.
Yep, and it is it is very interesting when we talk about this because I how could we how could we not how could we not feel impressed by the technological advancements nowadays? One of the reasons for not appreciating his music enough when I was younger
Hmm.
um, was was my was I didn't
But
understand
did
German.
you? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't understand German, and then back then,
But
um,
did you the parenthesis, the piece I was referring to was contra cadence. Contracadence was from
for
1970
for
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 large
large orchestra.
orchestra.
Yeah.
That piece has stayed with me. I listen to it every time, and every time I find new things, new ideas. That sound where he created there with the orchestra, that's something that I never ever have heard before him, and I don't think that I have heard since. He's most known for his string works, right? For his string work for Grand Torso, for Guero. No, Guero was it? His string quartets. He has three string quartets. But for me, it was Contra Cadence. The way he used the orchestra, it was unprecedented, really. And I don't say that lightly. And another piece that I must highlight would be his duo for guitar. His guitar duo, Salute for Caldwell.
Huh.
It's like there's not another piece for guitar that sounds like that, and I don't think that there will ever be another piece like that that sounds like that. It's like a soundscape that he creates, which is unprecedented. He's a master uh, of being himself. If you consider that the artist is the ultimate expression of the individual, then I think that Lachenmann reaches those heights of individuality, that an idiosyncratic language that few artists throughout history have been able to achieve.
W-
Honestly,
one thing that I didn't add, didn't talk about is his publisher actually added the English translation la- in if not all, but in some of his scores nowadays.
hmm
I think it's very helpful for us to study his music. I Well, because we all know
right.
when we try to rehearse our music, if you write like Lachenmann, you will be questioned. Why? What do you want? What kind of techniques do you want to achieve? And and you need to know very clearly about what to do with your instruments. You need to study your instruments very well. In other words, I think Lachenmann did a lot of homework himself. He
Yeah.
he definitely studied and researched very hard. You just imagine nowadays we have a lot of books, we have a lot of YouTube videos that we can take a look, we can hear the sound. But back then we're talking about like the 60s, 70s. He probably need to ask the players to try his crazy stuff, and 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 maybe he had to rotate what the instrumentalists offer him. A lot of
Yes.
work.
Yes. He actually
My
he
apology that I didn't like read his any biography or anything to supplement this episode, but he definitely did a lot of homework.
it reminds me, no, definitely but it reminds me of a quote by Beethoven, like how he wanted to spend time with the musicians of the orchestra, with the different instrumentalists, uh like learn the intricacies of every instrument. Laheman just did that, especially with the strings, but with every piece it was like such a rigorous, uh, you can see every piece as a rigorous research for the instrument, of what the instrument is capable of. Actually, I don't know if they can, if classical instruments, if acoustical instruments can be taken any further than he took them. Like it is a challenge for living composers to live up to that legacy that he left us.
I when By the way, when you talk about orchestral piece, I think I really like two other pieces by Lachenmann. One is, maybe I pronounce it wrong. Tableau, Tableau, Tableau.
Tableau,
Tableau.
tableau. the bleu.
I like it. It is like I
It's
think
in
it's
French. It's in French, actually.
I
Not
like
in not
this
in
piece,
German. That for some reason.
and
That's nice.
I like air I think it's like a solo percussion with orchestra. I think.
Yeah,
Um.
I don't think I know that one. What's that one for solo percussion?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's the piece, and both for both pieces you could hear a lot of the like very delicate sound, but at the same time, a lot of very very bold, very direct color from the composer. For example, it's like a very Germanic or like a lot of German orchestral works that you can hear huge brass chords, the sudden
Yes.
outburst of this kind of brass sound, and then and so I would say Lachenmann music has a very good balance of wild techniques and all and delicate nuances, and at the same time a lot of very bold writing.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Like he can go from the most subtle stuff, like really pianissimo techniques, uh, like bowing under the tailpiece or bowing over the tailpiece, for example, and make them effective, but at the same time go or raw and violent and crude. Like he got I tell you, the palette of the composer got extended in such a way that we haven't seen. I think, like, oh my god, I'm not even gonna try and do a comparison here, but it got we got a lot of new colors out of him. Is all I'm gonna say, and I think we should move on
Yep,
towards
yep.
the next composer, which I used to know him better, but I haven't listened to him in a while, so I will leave this discussion mostly to you, and I'm gonna comment. And the next one is gonna be Vito Lutoslavski.
Yep. Um, Again, just like the previous two composers, I'm going to embarrass myself again, sharing
You
some of
you
their
like do
little
you like
story.
doing this. You like
Yeah,
doing this.
yes, yeah. Um, when I don't, I guess you know, right? Did you know ISCM, the International Society of Contemporary Music?
Yes,
When
yes, yes.
when I first entered conservatory, there I believe it was my first year. If not, it would be the second year. And then ISCM had a music festival, mostly hosted by my conservatory. And then still, there was the
That's
first event that
Lutoslavski.
made me feel very overwhelmed by contemporary music. And
What year was this?
I think it's 2002 or 2003.
Okay.
Um, and but back then, the Polish composers we listened a lot was Penderecki,
Yeah.
because the threnody was performed in Hong Kong. I don't know whether it was the Asian premiere or Hong Kong premiere, but yes, we listened to Penderecki, and Penderecki came to Hong Kong again for his violin concerto.
That's pretty interesting because Penderecki was kind of the resident conductor for the Casals Festival here in Puerto Rico for quite a few years. I've heard, but
I
it's like his influence was felt more towards the music that he wrote later. You know that he turned more towards a romantic language
Yep.
and stuff like that. Like that was those were the years that he was here, and that was the influence. So it was more of an extension of what we already have here. So
And
not the Trinity that much.
but and then the next one we listen a lot is Goretzky, because of the what's the name of which one? Symphony number 2 or number 3, the one that has a very slow canon. And then later on, we found Lutoslawski. And but back then I knew very little. I only knew his string quartets. And then one day a friend came to me. He said, "Oh, that's a girl. And she's pretty actually." So she asked me, "Hey, what I should study?" I tried. I was a little bit pretentious, and then I tried to sound sophisticated. Oh, you should study Lutoslawski string quartet. And then later on, I had a lesson with my composition professor, and then he said, "Why did you tell her to study Lutoslawski string quartet?"
Oh God.
My composition professor was very open-minded. So what he didn't mean that you shouldn't study avant-garde or post-war composer. Actually, he rooted for that. But too difficult to study for a first-year composition student. Why do you recommend such a piece to a new student? Are you scared the shit out of
she,
her?
yeah, she's gonna get scared of being a composer and quit. No, you
Yeah.
don't do that.
And she becomes a very good composer for musicals nowadays. So
Well,
if
musicals.
you know me, probably you know her too, but not. I don't want to name her here because it sounds like I'm
No.
further embarrassing myself. But probably she forgot that episode in my life. But when I talk about Lutoslawski, I remember that very embarrassing moment of my life. Okay, anyway, so Lutoslawski for aleatoric techniques
Yeah,
in his writing.
it's technically called limited aleatory, limited aleatorism, aleatoricism.
And
Aleatoricism. Yeah, I'm pronouncing this right. Limited aleatoricism. And it brought a new I remember this one specifically with his second symphony. And yeah, it brought a new perspective to me of what you could do with aleatory music. Like, okay, you got the famous John Cage and all of that, and he's very dismissive. You can dismiss his music and I don't know. It wouldn't happen. It wouldn't change anything. At least from my perspective, it was like just pretty meh. He uh, to every festival I went to in the U.S., especially John Cage was like, oh my God, this inventor, composer, and all of that. For me, it was just lazy in some aspect. But Lutoslawski with his second symphony, like that showed me that this had some use, some practical use, and some artistic use, some merit to it. Like if you control it in a way, uh, yeah. And what did it create? New textures, textures that he kind of controlled but didn't control.
yep,
It's hard to explain, but in a way, they were similar to Ligeti, but at the same time very different. It was crazy for me. I listened to that. I remember listening to that symphony over and over and over again. Specifically, that second one written during the 60s, 1960s.
I
But
I I I think when we talk about this technique, actually we kind of remotely align with the topic we talked earlier when we talk about like polyphony or polyrhythm,
yes,
because um, in case listeners don't know about the string quartet, in the string quartet means you have two violins, a viola, and cello. And in Lutoslawski string quartet, actually, you can see they are playing individual passages, but they are told to line up in some places. For example, maybe first violin has a fermata, and then the other instrument will join at the time of the fermata, for example. And but they are not the piece is not notated in a conventional way that you that you know which notes should be lined up with another instruments. It's more like most of the time you are very individual.
It's
But
like
some
he notated his intention. He wanted something. He wanted a result, and it was up to the performer
yep,
or to the conductor to get there. He
yep,
just said, I want this type of sound. I have this type of sound in my head, and I want you to come with a way to produce it. And that's how he went about it. And I think that that was very, very creative from him
one
in some ways. Yeah.
I think if we try to, I mean, a lot of composition students begins with imitating masters, but it is very hard to imitate Lutoslawski, because if you notate the music like him, everybody will say, "Oh, you're just a copycat," because it's very distinctive.
Or
In
lazy.
but somehow, why do we need to study Lutoslawski? You may study it deeply, or you may study his music a little bit shallowly, you still need to study Lutoslawski, because actually when you learn his music, you learn to get rid of the conventional mindset that music or notes or texture must line up perfectly all the time. Actually, you need to get rid of this concept. You can get rid
Yes,
of this concept, and then you will have a
because
lot
it
more
never
freedom.
does. It never does.
Just like the polyrhythm, actually, where if you are a chamber musician, you'll find that if somebody play a triplet, and then if you need to play a quintuplet or whatever complex rhythm, actually it's very hard to line up. It's harder than what the notation look like, and
Yeah.
and to and by having such a aleatoric rating in, you are learning to to allow some kind of freedom to the musicians, but at the same time, you want to achieve the same good sound, same good
This
texture.
reminds me of something that our teacher used to say to us, like the score is there, okay, but it's a fiction. The reality is kind of like in the world of ideas, in the platonic world, in the abstract world. That's the score. The real in the real world, in the practical world, is the music.
Yep.
And I think that studying Lutoslawski and studying his scores in contrast to the music itself, how it sounds, reminds of us that the score in the end, if if it doesn't get played, it's just dead a dead paper, dead tree, a dead tree. Uh, and second, it's just a fiction. It's kind of like there's no really there can be a million interpretations going around it, but what you write as a composer is your intention, and what you must get across principally is not that you get every note right, that you get every melodic line right. Is your intention to communicate your intention, and if your intention is communicate it clearly, then I think you've succeeded as a composer.
I
I
I
think that we can take that from Lutoslawski.
and but if we need to, and I mean, I nearly forgot one
Mhm.
thing that you should study Lutoslawski. I mean, I should rephrase it. Why we should study Lutoslawski? Because actually you can learn from his work as a beginner composer, and also you can learn from his work as a more advanced composer too. He composed a wide variety of music, and
Yeah,
he also composed
very
something
eclectic.
he also composed something very straightforward, such as mini overture for brass quintet. I
Hmm.
y- and there is very complicated pieces like chains, like symphonies, mi party, or concert, or his concerti. The range of his works is huge. I think if you, maybe it is just me, but I think if you study his music only, you can still be a very pretty good composer, because a wide range of
Yeah,
works, and
and styles
and
and
styles, and they are all, they
techniques.
and his works can be suitable for beginners, intermediates, or advanced experienced composers as well.
In
And
a way, you can say that his body of work kind of encapsulates a lot of the history of Western music, right?
yep, and you know what? One of the reasons for me to revisit Lutoslawski was teaching children the piano.
Oh,
Uh, yeah, because
yeah, yeah, yeah. Those
be,
pieces.
um, I'm not too sure whether it was like part of like a piece from a bigger collection or whatever. I um I think a few years ago in the piano exam there was a piece for called Rector, like for children. And then oh yeah, I just realized oh actually contemporary composers could compose for children. and
Yes,
and but you but very meticulous, very rigorous writing.
and that goes in the tradition of Bartok again, like
Yep.
the microcosmos, and like those pieces. Like we got the Suzuki method. Sometimes it's very famous, very popular, right?
Yep.
But why don't we teach them with the microcosmos? Why isn't that more popular? Because you're not just teaching the technique, you're teaching them about music, you're teaching them about rhythm, you're teaching them about composition in a more musical manner, actually. I've always wondered that, but that will be a topic for another day. I think we should go to our last one from the 20th century. Do you agree, or do you want to say anything else about Lutoslawski?
Yeah, I think we need to move on. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's talk about your favorites now.
Yeah, and this one will be Gérard Grisey. Um, and let me check. Give me a second. Okay, Grisey. There's his name, and these are his pictures. How can we describe the Grisey's music? And can we describe him?
Grisey.
We will have to speak about, well, the supposed movement that he was in a part of, which he hated the label. He was the only one that really um, rejected the label because his music was so much more than that, and it is spectralism. He was supposed to be a spectral composer, right? There's one picture of him. There's another picture of him, right? Okay. Um, but I think his music, yeah. Why did he rejected that? Because he explored so many different things, so many ways in which, okay, his basis was analyzing the spectra of music. But then what did he do with it? He then just created these harmonies, and we this is the first composer that we can really speak that got into harmony and expanded the harmonic language of 20th century music, of post-war 20th century music, right? The spectralists, especially Grisey, he gets overshadowed in many ways by Tristan Mural that lived longer. Grisey died I think in 1998. Tragically, he never had a huge piece for us orchestra. His ensemble pieces are like for smaller ensembles. But what he says with his music, with something like Vortex Temporum, do you know the piece
Which
or
one?
no? Vortex Temporum.
No.
No.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, sorry. I think I know it. I just couldn't because my pronunciation was my not was my
it, it's
pronunciation
what
is terrible. So I suddenly couldn't reconnect the sound with the actual title. Sorry. Yeah, keep going, please.
Vo- Vortex Temporum is kind of like this, and we go back to the process. You can listen the form and the content being the same, how it unfolds throughout time, how the colors, how his teacher, Messiaen, Olivier Messiaen, used to talk about colorful music. I don't think that there's a better example of colorful music than Gérard Grisey. He had this sense of color, and it didn't only come from studying spectra. It was like part of his artistry, part of his craftsmanship, like and singing it very uh, egregiously, obnoxiously. But yeah, that's more or less like how Vortex Temporal goes and how it unfolds in time. And this piece is from 94, from 96. It's from 94 through 96 he wrote it. And yeah, it kind
I
of
think
sums up his
it's a
whole.
rather late work of his, right?
It's a late work of his, but it shows his maturity and
Yep.
how he kind of like uh, grew out of the other spectralists, you might say, like Christian Mural, or the second generation like Sarriajo, which use this kind of like clouds or big chords that stayed for a while and changed slowly in pitch and stuff like that. His music was more active, and that activity, that activeness, in lack of a better word, is what kept it interesting. Like for other spectralists, you might say that okay, the harmony is very beautiful, very colorful, but it kind of gets repetitive, and you see the process for what it is, and it's kind of very systematic, you might say. It kind of loses a bit of humanity. They attach themselves too much to to what they learn in the electronic music laboratory. But Grisey, he always had some surprise for you, and silence was very important. Like how he used it, how then he introduced chords after silence, how he used unexpected silences. That was very important for him, and the gestures. Our teacher, I mentioned him on various occasions. I'm talking about David Felder. We all both studied
Oh,
under
oh.
David Felder, uh, and I should say our old teacher, right? Because right now we don't have a teacher. When we used to be students at Buffalo, at the University of Buffalo, we studied under David Felder. But yeah, he used to say, what was it that he used to say, that there should be some artistry, some idiosyncrasy, some humanity. In the end, it cannot be all a strict process, right? And I think that Grisey shows us that in many, many ways, and how to remain fresh throughout his career, even through short. You can see a Grisey in the 70s, you can see a Grisey in the 80s, you can see a Grisey in the 90s, and make a clear distinction between all of these Griseys. And for me, his music is always fresh, it's always contemporary, so to say. Uh, yeah.
And one thing that is very, I mean, if we talk about what we learn from Grisey, at least one thing about the pursuit of the richness of sonority.
Yeah.
Actually, somehow, when sound, when sonority or timbre is examined, we as composers, we are not just trying to examine the sounds. We try to make use of it, try to look for it, try to present a journey, try to present an exploration of those sounds in a musical way. And
I totally missed that, and you're complementing this
and
perfectly.
and earlier piece is called Steely by
Mhm.
for two percussionists. Very simple. In if you talk about the instrumentation,
Yeah,
I think it's just two bass drums of different sizes. Then,
huge sound.
but how should you do with it? What should you do with it? A lot of percussion pieces involve a large array of instruments, but this time you only got two bass drums.
Yes,
So
and how to maintain it to be interesting throughout the whole piece.
and and
He
how to make the process, because we for example, how to move the beater, the placement of the beater, the location, how you beat the bass drum, how do you change it, what kind of sound do you want to explore, how to withdraw from the instruments, the huge process. Actually, I think this is more important than just trying to write some instrumental music like an electronic music. It is about the process,
yes, yes,
and
definitely.
and
And how to maintain it interesting to for the listener and for yourself. But you have to make it interesting for yourself first, right? Because
yeah,
you're a composer, and that reminds me, like Vortex Temporum and other most of his pieces. One thing that stayed constant, like he made a lot of changes throughout the decades through his three active decades, but one of the constants was that he used a lot of repetition, but he kind of like put it in a new light or with different
yep,
accents, with different organization of pitches, but it was still the same material, and how it sounded fresh again and again and again. And it's really the economy of materials combined with the variety is very, very impressive in a way. At the same time, while expressing this sound word, this timbric, well, this array of timbres that was very colorful, colorful, very interesting. That remained that way throughout the whole piece. You were on the edge of the seat. At least for me, it was like, what's gonna happen next? Even though he kind of used the same materials, it's hard to explain, and it's harder to achieve that as a composer, because what usually happens is that you fall into a type of minimalism, or you kind of like mm, uh, go and yeah, a minimalism, or go the other route. It's like too many different changes that even though you are using the same materials, it's like not the same materials, and it doesn't work the same way, is what I will have to say. So there's a lot to learn. His last piece was Quatre Chants pour franchir le soil, for soprano and 15 instruments. So he also explored the voice in very, very um, non-orthodox, interesting, colorful ways. So uh, there's a lot to learn from him. He's a
and all,
master.
and also we if you are interested in his music, you can look into Talia.
Talia,
Yeah,
Talia, definitely. Talia is another. Yeah, I think that he wrote masterpiece after masterpiece. Your Contre is another one. Solo Purdue, Solo for Two. Uh, I mentioned Vortex Temporum, Lenoir de l'Etoile. Lenoir de l'Etoile, that's one of the pieces that I say. And if you listen, you can listen to, you get the chance of listening to it in a surround sound setting. Oh my gosh, that's one of the pieces where he really repeats the material over and over and again, but every time he puts it in a new light. He is new. It's new to the listener, to me as a listener. And yeah, that's what Grisey. He was something else. You cannot call him an spectral composer in the traditional sense of the word. Letam elekum for four percussionists and two synthesizers. I think that one of his pieces was played. I think probably it was Tempus Ex Machina. I might be wrong, but it was played in Buffalo once or twice, and it was in a surround sound setting. And yeah, that was a real awesome experience. And well, that's pretty much what I have to say about Grisey. Do you wanna add something else?
Um, I fortunately I don't have to embarrass myself about Crusade this time.
Yes,
I, I
we
almost
end on a
forgot
high
about
note.
yeah. Special music came to my life pretty late. I think I I got to know Grisey and Murray because a composition teacher studied with Grisey came
Mm.
to our alma mater, the Hong Kong Academy for Performing Arts, and and yeah, s- what can you say when a genius composer pass away too young?
Oh,
Yeah, too young, simply too young.
what could have been, right? Like he was producing a lot of interesting works up until he died. Like huh,
Then
I mentioned Quatre Chants pour uh Franchise. What was it? Oh, I'm sorry.
as a,
Quatre,
as a
Quatre Chants pour Franchir Les Oeils.
I
For soprano and 15 instruments, and that was written during his last years of being alive. Like, and he ended on a high note as a composer. You see some composers like dry out or slow down. We mentioned Penderecki, and I think that was the case with Penderecki. He kind of like threw himself to the gutter towards the end of his the last decades. But yeah, like Grisey showed so much promise of continuing on and on with good works, but it's really sad. It's a tragedy. It's tragic, a tragedy.
don't want to sound emotional or sentimental, but these few years, some very good composers pass away,
Yes.
including some friends we know over in a festival or at school. You know, Rob
Yeah.
Phillips, a very
Of course.
promising, sometimes maybe idiosyncratic a little bit, but a very good composer himself. And then maybe this episode we is when we talk about this, maybe a good time to pay tributes to him. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We also remember you, Rob. Yeah,
Yeah, Rob. He was a really awesome person. Like,
yeah.
oh my gosh. Uh, so many good memories. Uh, and he passed too young. He passed away too
Yeah.
young. He had uh, a lot of music to offer the world still. Like, and he was admired by his contemporaries, which is rare in this world. In the composers world, there's a lot of
Especially for composers, because
yes,
all
yes,
when especially when you get a little bit more advanced or experience, you will start to have your individual voice, and then you will easily um, become opinionated. But this doesn't stop us liking him as a person or as a composer. So yeah,
yeah,
good luck.
yeah.
Good luck to all the listeners, if there is any. Um,
I
we
hope
all
we
we
could
need
have
to
until
pursue we need to pursue our dream early. because you don't know what phase we will actually face.
Or how long can we do this? Or how many pieces can we compose? Like, it's up to fate. We sometimes it's out of our hands. We are kind of lucky that we are can still compose and somehow present our pieces in one way or another, or record them or whatever. But yeah, it's just keep doing it, and you will know that it is the way to go.
By the way,
Well, yeah,
before we say goodbye, and why don't we quickly think about what we should say next time? What do you think?
about what next time?
I mean, for the next episode, what do you want to talk about?
Next episode. Oh, first of all, let me put the name of Rob. So his name was Robert Phillips. We call him Robs.
Yeah, yeah, we call
He
him
was from
Rob.
Cali. He was from California. The name is on screen,
Yeah,
and we are paying tribute to him here in a way.
yeah.
Um, may his soul rest in peace. And well, uh, well, what else can you say? He was a great human being, a great composer. He was
A
admired by
cheerful person. A cheerful
very
person, I
cheerful.
would say.
Yeah, I never saw him mad or sad or talking ill about anyone. I only have good memories about him.
I have to confess, I think I'm I have to mind my language when we talk about Rob because he's such a gentleman. I would say
Yeah,
a gentleman.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
There are. I don't think that I have heard anyone speak ill about him. Anyone.
very hard,
Well,
especially
uh,
for composers.
well, next we can continue like with composers that are still alive. For example, we plan on talking about Nishimura, about Julio. I have here Julio Estrada. These are composers that are older composers but
Let's
are
talk about
still
some.
alive. But we can also talk about the orchestra. We can also talk about techniques. We can also talk about so many things.
Yeah,
I don't know. We will let you guys know, our lovely audience of so many viewers. Like, we'll let you know in advance for sure. And I think that will be it for this episode.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So have a nice day, nice
have a
evening,
nice day.
whenever you are watching. So until next time, in 2 weeks, I will say
Uh,
bye.
you are a composer. Happy composing. Good luck.
Good luck.